Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Caberti, founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. And before we jump into today's episode, let me ask you a quick question. How much would your life change if you could make 6 figures from your content? Imagine being able to quit your 9-to-5 job, do what you love for a living, and spend more time with your family. That's what we help our students do at the Content Marketing Plaza, an 8-week program that will help you build your way to 6 figures via your content. You can learn more about the Plaza by heading over to contentmarketingplaza.com, which will be in the show notes. All right, let's jump right back into the episode. When it comes to success for any business, you have to get clear on what your core values are. These are going to be basically your North Star that guide you through some of the more challenging phases of your company. They're going to allow you to see massive success if you choose the right core values. So how exactly do we establish the right core values for our company and really practice them instead of them just being there but not really implemented? So we want to get these great core values, also make them a part of the company culture. That's going to be the focus of this episode. Today's guest who joins us today, she is the brand ambassador of Neighborly, the world's largest franchisor of home service businesses with over 35,000 franchisees. The holding company consists of 21 service brands focused on repairing, maintaining, and enhancing consumers' homes and businesses. She has appeared on CBS's Undercover Boss and was asked back by CBS to appear on Undercover Boss Epic Bosses. She is a franchise executive with more than 37 years of industry experience. Today's guest for episode 324 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Dina Dwyer-Owens. Dina, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Mark, I am delighted to be with you. And you said 35,000 franchises, which is a huge dream come true, but we're not quite there yet. We're at 3,500. So
3,500, okay.
We're getting close, but it's that 10 times multiplier that we're working on. We'll get there one day.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe it. I mean, the fact that you guys have grown so much already, I mean, getting on Undercover Boss, I mean, it just shows a lot of people know Undercover Boss, and I've definitely seen it myself, so I'm sure you guys are going to just keep on growing. Thank you for that clarification there. Core values, that is such a valuable topic because the core values can really make or break any company. We'll get into that. Before we do, though, can you share a little bit with us on why you decided to start Neighborly and some of the backstory behind that?
Sure. My father actually founded the company in 1981 with one brand called Rainbow International. It was a carpet dyeing and cleaning company, but he had a vision of having a collection of franchise companies serving the same customer base. And what he loved about franchising so much is that he had the ability to help other people get into business for themselves, but not by themselves. And this dream today has just lived on 38 years later. Unfortunately, he passed away at the young age of 60 in 1994 after having a sudden heart attack and after just taking the company public in 1993. So a tremendous amount of growing pains that we've been through here at Neighborly. But Neighborly is this community of home service experts so that you, your friends, your family, when they need something done in their homes or their small businesses, they don't have time to do it themselves. So we want to be the place that consumers can trust to go to get those services done by licensed, trusted professionals.
And it's interesting that, you have a company that, it's family business, passed down, and just this idea of helping people. And it's, I sense that's something very important, just this idea of helping people. And knowing what's important to you is part of how we come up with our core values. But I'm wondering if you could share a little bit on how we can find our core values, because I feel like there are some general ones, but how do we find the ones that work for us and even get a little more specific with the values?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I'll start first with sharing what our company's mission statement is. So many companies spend a lot of time getting clarity on their mission, their vision, their values. But the sad news is most of them don't do anything to follow through and execute on those. And our mission has been with our company since 1981, and that's to teach our principles and systems of both personal and business success so that all people we touch live happier, more successful lives. So the values piece fits both sides, right? It fits your personal definition of success as well as your business definition for success. So we spend a lot of time, Mark, helping people get clarity about their values. We introduced them to Neighborly's core values because we were founded on a set of core values. Our founder studied great leaders, and he learned that great leaders were always clear about their values, and those values were in writing. And not only that, but they shared their values with anybody that they met. So we've carried that forward even after our founder's death. In fact, took them to the next level. We took original values and we operationalized them. So today we call it Living Rich at Neighborly. And the RICH is an acronym for our 4 core values of respect, integrity, customer focus, and one of my favorites, having fun in the process. So we know that that's the way we want to lead this business. And we invite people to join us who believe the same values we believe. And these don't only benefit you at work, these benefit you at home. And something we've done differently with Neighborly's values is we've clearly identified the behaviors that we expect. So when you talk about respect being a value, well, what do you mean by that? Exactly, what do you mean by respect? I mean, you're a young man. You might define respect differently than me. I'm an older woman, so we may have two different definitions. So we don't want to leave it to chance. So we say, this is what respect means. And we call them values still, but it means listening with the intent to understand what's being said and acknowledging that what's said is important to the speaker. And it goes on and on because we don't want people to wonder, what do you mean by respect? But in order to get there, I actually have a Create Your Culture workbook along with some books that could help people if they're really serious about it. But you've got to do a lot of thinking about who you are, what you want your organization to be known for, and then go through a process of identifying what are our core values. And don't do it alone. Most of us have a team of people that help support us. So when we originally did this, I was the CEO, and we invited folks to come in. Actually, I'm wrong. I was vice president of operations at the time, and I was appointed by the CEO to be in charge of this committee. And we got a lot of input from a lot of folks who'd been part of our company who knew what we wanted to be in the future. We wanted to be even better than we were already. And then we went through a series of processes to include inviting the entire company to get involved in practicing what we thought the values should be and making sure we were really committed to living up to them. But it starts with really thinking deeply about how do you want to operate your business and who do you want to be known for? And, when asked the question, would people say, absolutely, that's a business that stands for respect and integrity.
And I really like how you mentioned that you define those words because respect means different things to different people. But if you are really clear on what each of those general terms, parts of your values and mission statement mean, it's definitely easier to live up to them. But I think one thing you did touch on is that a lot of people, they have the mission statement, they have the core values, but they may not necessarily act upon them, or they may bend the rules a little bit when a challenge comes so that they get a bigger profit or something like that. So how can we act upon our core values even when it may hurt our bottom line or some kind of result we're after?
It may hurt the bottom line temporarily, but in the long run, if you want to be a sustainable, trusted brand that is making more profits than anybody else in your industry, it's sticking to your core values. So I have a saying that values create value, and they create value in way of financial results. Because when you do what's right by the people, your employees, and by the customers, you'll always win in the end. And yes, temporarily, maybe you are going to have a setback financially. But if you keep plugging away and leading with the values, it'll come back around to benefit you. When you do what's right, you'll always be rewarded. And I could tell you story after story here at Neighborly where that's benefited us. So if we have time, I'd love to just go into one particular story on how values have created tremendous value
Definitely.
for our organization.
I mean, I'm wondering if you could share with us that story right now, because I feel like that could really just give people a concrete example.
You bet. So our company today is called Neighborly, which to me is a pretty high bar to put that kind of a name on your business. you're asking yourselves to really live with your values, because if we're to be neighborly to not only our employees and franchisees, but to our customers and people in the community, that's a high bar. We would not be where we are today, Mark, had we not built this business on values. So it starts with striving to lead with your values and knowing that you're not going to be perfect. So as leaders, we've got to admit when we fall, right? Because we're all going to fall. We're all going to make mistakes. And the best thing we can do is to own those mistakes. And because that's the way we've built this business, we've attracted amazing employees. We're based in Waco, Texas. Waco wasn't always such a popular place, and then Magnolia came along and Fixer Upper. Now it's a little more popular. But so for years, it seemed like it would be challenging to attract great talent to Waco, Texas, to work in our growing organization. But you know what? People want to be part of something special. People were coming to us to say, how do I become part of Neighborly? Then we attract the right franchisees. So we're a franchise organization. You don't sell franchises unless you have a happy base of franchisees who will validate that you're a great organization to be part of. So we have 3,500 plus franchisees today. Some of those were through acquisition, so I need to make sure I give that disclaimer. But most of them were through us growing organically. And yet even the ones that came through acquisitions, we were hand selecting the businesses we wanted to acquire that we believed culturally were a fit for us. And we've said no to other businesses that culturally were not a fit for us. But here's the really big picture. We were publicly traded up until 2003. We went into a relationship with a private equity group based there in New York City called the Riverside Company. Riverside couldn't believe that we were really living our values. They thought it was kind of hokey. We're going to go visit these people in Waco, Texas. They've got a good business, but this whole values thing seems a little hokey. But they got here, and the experience they had with us was that it was real. We were really striving to lead with these values. So they invested in us. They helped grow our business beautifully. A lot of work, so we all had to work hard, right? Doesn't come without a lot of work, but they helped grow our business beautifully. When it went time to go to the market and find the next private equity partner, we teamed up with another New York-based company called TZP, another company culturally aligned with us. In fact, both of those private equity firms ended up getting clarity about their personal values, their organizational values, after spending time with us, because they saw that these things really do matter. They really do make a difference. So here's where it gets kind of even more fun. So TZP's in their third year of ownership with us, and we get a call from our friends at Riverside, who just raised a $1.5 billion fund. They're trying to find great companies to invest in. They're struggling to find companies that they can put their money to work. They call me and they say, Dina, you've always teased us about buying you back one day whenever TZP goes to sell the company, but we really would love the opportunity to reinvest in Dwyer. It was Dwyer Group back then, now Neighborly. Would you all be open to that? We recognized we'd have to pay a premium because TZP's only owned you for 3 years. They haven't had a chance to really get a return on their investment yet. Would you be interested? And we said, absolutely, as long as our private equity partner is. So they came back, and without talking specific numbers, bought us for 2 times more than they sold us 3 years earlier. Mark, one of the reasons they cited they wanted to reinvest in Dwyer, now Neighborly, is because of our values and our culture. I just want to say bam, because that's how I feel about it. It's a big deal.
I mean, just for the fact that they cited the values and the culture, it's not something that shows up on the income statement, but it is something that influences the income statement. And it's interesting when you mentioned the acquisitions, some that you accepted, some you rejected. You mentioned the culture and the values as a determining factor for whether a company would get accepted or declined for the acquisition you were thinking of. And I'm wondering, how do you dive into another company's culture or someone else's values and figure out what they value?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I should say that after Riverside reacquired us, our CEO and team, collectively our team and franchisees, grew the business 3 times our size in a little over 3 years. And the values, again, are a driver of that. And so now we've teamed up with another private equity group because people started seeing what was happening here and said, wow, how can we buy into this Neighborly company? And we partnered with another private equity group who just bought out Riverside last May called Harvest. And we would not have teamed up with Harvest had our CEO not done reference checks to realize that this is a company culturally that we believe is a fit for us. And our experience so far has just been tremendous, and they're really investing in the future, but they are so aligned in our culture. Now, when we're looking at acquisitions, it's pretty quick, Mark. for us to identify whether a business is right for us or not. First of all, we've been in franchising for a long time, and we only usually acquire already franchised businesses. So we kind of already know the reputation of those businesses, and we pretty much know culturally what they're about. If it's all about just making the most money that they can make, that's not a good fit for us. And so we'll go in. We'll usually take a look at a company if we don't know them well enough. We'll get to know the leadership team, and that tells you a whole lot about a business. That first day of meetings, by the end of a long day, you kind of start seeing the true colors of the people and the presenters that come in and are doing the marketing or management presentations. You get a feel. You walk around their offices, you get a feel. It doesn't take long, to be honest with you. And then making reference calls. It's really easy to talk to existing franchisees and find out, how's this company to work with. So usually we don't go very far before we identify that this is not going to be a good fit. And what we know is that it's very difficult to change the culture of an existing business that's been around for some time. And most of the businesses we acquire have been around for some time, and they've got strong unit economics already. And if we don't believe we can really add value and shift that culture, at least in a short period of time during the integration process, then it's just not worth the energy and the money we'd have to put into it.
And it's interesting you mentioned it's not that much time before you figure out what the culture is. One key thing I want to point out with Dina's example is that she's in there for hours at a time. So I feel like if you get all immersed in the important people, like the decision makers, CEO, CFO, people like that, and you are around this certain individual or this certain company, you get an idea of what the culture is right away. It's harder to get a grasp of it from an article somewhere or from a 15-minute call with their best representatives. So, I definitely like that idea of a full immersion just for one day or maybe just a few hours even. You may not have to do that, but if you're looking to acquire a company, that's definitely something you should be doing. I'd like to shift this back a little bit to anyone in general who has a company, because core values, it doesn't matter if your business is as big as Neighborly or if you just have the lemonade stand in your neighborhood. The core values are important. And we mentioned earlier that not everyone actually lives up to their core values. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, what do you believe holds most people back from really reaching their full potential in living by their core values?
Probably a couple of things. Fear. And fear is defined as false evidence that appears real. So many times we're around maybe peers or other folks who, when we say we don't use profanity in our offices, one of our values under respect is speaking calmly and respectfully without profanity or sarcasm. And it's interesting because that one is one that, we're in the trades businesses. You think about our businesses, Mr. Reader Plumbing, Mr. Electric, Mr. Appliance. They're not all going to use profanity, but, there are some bad habits that people have. And when you're in a situation where people are using profanity, you have to have the courage, if that's one of your values, to say, I'm having a hard time listening to this conversation because I just, profanity is just one of the things that we try really hard not to do here at Neighborly. So could I ask that you guys can just, kind of quiet down the profanity for us so we can have a professional conversation? That's a hard conversation to have with people because you don't want to come across as judging them, especially if they're not part of your company, but to be able to be strong enough and have the courage to say that this is one of our values. You know what I have found, Mark, that's just amazing to me is when you lead by example and you share your core values with the people that you're doing business with up front. That should be one of the first things you discuss with people that you're either doing business with or intending to do business with. Let them know who you are and what you stand for. And always admit you're not perfect, because I am so far from perfect. It commands a certain level of respect because people love knowing somebody who's so clear about what's important to them. And again, not to push my values on you, because you may not believe the same things I believe, but for me not to be afraid to be open about what my values are. I travel the globe, Mark, and I talk about Neighborly's values because I think there's such an opportunity to inspire others. Much like you want to touch millions of lives with your message, I want to touch tens of millions of lives with the message that Values guided leadership is the only way to go, but it takes real courage. You can't be afraid.
And I mean, you mentioned that very interesting conversation where, I mean, some people, they have one way of conducting themselves that goes completely contradictory with their core values. But if you point them out in advance, it's like, hey, here are the ground rules. I'm happy to do business with you. I'm happy to learn, conversate, have a fun time. But these are the values that I live by. And I like that. I mean, it really gives that respect right away, where people understand what you're all about instead of learning in the middle of a conversation or transaction or partnership. So it's definitely good to be right in front with those kinds of values. And if you are, like, that is a really great habit to have, being in front with those values. But in addition to that great habit, I'm wondering, Dina, if you could share with us some of the other habits that you would consider essential to your success.
Yeah, the greatest habit around the values, and remember, we're a franchise organization. So what a franchise company does is we take what's most important in the business and we create systems around that so that those systems can be replicated. That's the whole idea, right? So we can help people maybe who don't understand how to run a successful maid service company, how to be successful at that. So when we created these operationalized code of values, we said we've got to create a system around the values. So regardless of who's leading the company, right? Our founder died. Regardless of who's leading the company, this system needs to stay in place so it becomes part of the DNA, the everyday DNA of Neighborly. So what we do as a habit is anytime we have a meeting of 3 or more of our team members or our franchisees, is we kick the meeting off by reflecting on the values. Sometimes, Mark, we'll read all 15 values because we have 15 when you count those accountability statements. Sometimes, like our CEO just yesterday, I really appreciate his leadership. Just yesterday, he kicked off a company-wide meeting where our global team of associates were all either in the room or, Skyping in. And he kicked it off by saying there's 2 things that we're going to focus in on this meeting today, and there's 2 values that go hand in hand with those. And he cited 2 values in particular as he kicked the meeting off that we were going to focus on. And as he went through the meeting, he kept referring back to those 2 values and how they tied into his presentations. So it's the system of bringing the values front and center every meeting of 3 or more people. And it's our responsibility as an entire organization, not just mine, not just our CEOs, anybody who's conducting a meeting. It's their responsibility to kick that meeting off by reflecting on the values. And it could even be just highlighting a team member that's in the room and saying, look, shout out for Mark. We just heard from one of the customers that Mark really went above and beyond. So he achieved our value of continuously striving to maximize internal and external customer loyalty. Way to go, Mark. It could be just that, but it's constantly in front.
And I really like that habit. I mean, it just doubles down on this idea where you're upfront with people who you're having a conversation with, like people who you may partner with or companies that you may acquire, but also being in front with your whole team about it and just trying to mention those values as often as you can throughout the day. That's definitely going to get those values to stick, not just with you, because I'm sure you could recite all of them. And if not, I'm sure there's like a piece of paper like very close to you with your values on it. You got it?
I know them by heart, with heart, but this is always in front of me. Yep. But we ask our team members to learn them by heart, with heart. That needs to be internalized. That's another habit, is to memorize your values, but not think of it as a memorization act, but an internalization. Because when things go wrong in our business or in our personal lives, what we should do is go right to the values. And which values can I use to help solve this problem? Or which values do I need to apply to admit that I just made a big mistake? Right, and take ownership, because one of our values is operating in a responsible manner above the line. And it means, I got to take ownership.
I mean, that's certainly an awesome value to have, because we have to claim ownership, as Dina mentioned, because if you blame someone else for something that happens to you, it doesn't change the result that actually happens. So if you take ownership, that's just the first step to actually solving any problem that comes your way. So, I mean, it's really awesome to see that you have those in front of you. You probably have them all memorized, and you really have everyone on the team memorize them by heart as well, and have that meaning attached to it. And one of the other habits that I feel like can help a lot of people is education and learning as much as you can and growing every day. One of my favorite ways to do that is through reading books. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could give us a book recommendation that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Well, and this is a selfish promotion, but I have two books that are written about values-guided leadership. The first is called Live Rich, and that is our acronym again for our values of respect, integrity, customer focus, and having fun. The second book I wrote, Mark, that's really written more for the global audience, even people who don't have a business. Maybe it's a not-for-profit. Maybe it's a mother who's just trying to create values for her family. It's called Values Inc., and both of them can be found at my website, so DinaDwyer-Owens.com. You can find both of those books. You could also download a free Create Your Culture workbook, and that's a workbook that takes you through 6 simple steps. They're not easy, but they're simple steps to help you get clarity about your values and then put them to work.
Dina, thank you for sharing those great book recommendations. Those will be in the show notes, markberty.com/E324. Also throw in Content Marketing Secrets and Podcast Domination. Those are my books. Those will be in the show notes as well. And before we wrap up this episode, I've asked you a few questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
How can I be a better leader? I'm speaking tonight at a Chamber of Commerce banquet. And one of the first questions is, what's the state of leadership? And, it's so normal, Mark, that I would first think about all the external leaders around me and, whether it's in my family, my community, my world. But I thought, that's not the right way to think about the state of leadership today. When I think about the state of leadership, I should be looking internally and saying to myself, what is my state of leadership? What could I do better? And I encourage people not to try to put a big list together of things you need to get better at, because that's overwhelming and you're likely not going to do it. But go back to the habit thing you were talking about. So if something you need to get better at is praising people on your team because maybe you don't do a good job of that, then maybe the habit is one thank you card a day. Simply slow yourself down for 5 minutes and write a personal thank you card to one of your team members, thanking them specifically for something that they've done or that you appreciate about them. So I think we have to look internally as leaders, and we have to challenge ourselves to create new good habits and just pick one at a time. Practice that for the 21 days until you get into a process of it being habitual, and then move on to the next one.
Dina, thank you so much for sharing that question. And I like that thank you card idea. That's definitely something we should be doing a lot more. I mean, you could do something as simple as email. Definitely the physical card has a bigger impact, but email, I mean, it's very low barrier to entry. So I definitely recommend that for everyone to do. One thing I also recommend, get Dina's books. Those will be in the show notes, but the book names again are Live Rich and Values Inc. You can also get Dina's workbook, which will also be in the show notes, and head over to her website as well. But once again, I can't thank you enough for sharing all the great insights with us and coming on the show. It was such a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for the difference you're making.
Want to dominate the podcasting industry? Now you can with your free copy of my book, Podcast Domination. You'll learn how to launch, grow, and monetize your very own show. And whether you are a beginner or an expert, this book has a lot of golden nuggets for you. We'll cover the cost of producing this book. All we ask is that you cover the shipping. To get your copy, head over to markberty.com/PD.